All right, we've got another interview on here. We have assistant coach Stephen Pearl coming on the podcast. He is the winningest coach by percentage of any coach we've had on, or any player, or anybody on the whole team. He set the record. He's 1-0, 100% win record. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, until you guys have Coach Flanagan on next week, then you'll have the two winningest coaches in Auburn basketball history. So it's a pleasure to be on. Looking forward to it.
Well, we had to make that happen. We would love to have Wes Flanagan on here. We had KT Harrell 2 weeks ago, and we had Anthony McLemore last week.
Okay, nice. Very cool. Very cool.
We'll get into the questions here. I don't want to keep you for too long. You were an all-state player at West High School in Tennessee. What was your recruiting process like? Yeah, did you look at any other programs? Your dad was the coach at Tennessee at the time, right?
Yeah, so I got recruited by mid-majors, some low majors, and some Division II schools. So had a few options to go a few places on scholarship, but really wasn't that heavily recruited, just because I think a lot of people assumed that I was going to go to Tennessee. So had some Ivy Leagues and some mid majors looking at me, and ended up just making I was trying to make a mature decision. So obviously I knew, I was decent in high school. But I knew that basketball wasn't going to be like my end all be all as far as like a professional career. So I had to, try and step back and say, all right, where can I make the most connections to help set myself up for after college? Because let's be realistic, I'm not going to be playing the NBA anytime soon. So, where can I go that I can meet the right people to get into a good profession? And then two, understand that playing at Tennessee, I'd be able to compete at the highest level if I was able to make the rotation. And I was always up for a challenge like that, and I wanted to prove myself on the biggest stage. And it took a couple of years, but ended up finding a way to make it on the floor my last 2 years for 10, 15 minutes a game, and was a part of some really good programs or really good teams at Tennessee. And we got to travel the world. We went to Europe on a team trip. We went to a bunch of different really cool preseason tournaments, and you don't really get to have those experiences, when you're at a smaller school. And then obviously, having game days at Tennessee for football games, and there was just way more of an experience for me as a walk-on at Tennessee than having to go somewhere, a small town and playing a dominant role. So I had to look at the two and kind of weigh my options. And, I'm glad I did what I did.
You mentioned that international trip. There was a big one to Italy during the Final Four run, right?
Yeah.
They kind of had the team bond. Is there one coming up? I know there's like a rule every 4 years or something.
Yeah, we're talking about doing one this summer, looking at going to Israel potentially. So that's something that we've been looking at. And, obviously it's a huge advantage because, it used to be a huge advantage because you used to be able to practice 2 weeks before your foreign trip. And when I was in school, that wasn't a thing. Like, you didn't have summer workouts. Like, you had to work out on your own. You had to get in there with graduate assistants. You couldn't work out with full-time staff during the summer. And now there's the rules where you get 4 hours a week with accountable coaches. So, but the biggest advantage, like you said, is the whole bonding thing and getting to play in real meaningful games before you actually have a season. And I think, spending that time doing those tours and doing all the fun stuff as a unit, it's great for team bonding. And I think it's something that really helps as the year goes on. Like when we were at Tennessee, the year we did the European trip, we went like 32-5, won the SEC, and went to the Sweet 16. Then fast forward to Auburn, like you said, we went on the trip to Italy, and that team went to the Final Four. So I think there's a direct correlation between the time you get to spend together in the summer doing those things together, and then performance next season.
I have a couple questions about scouting. BP always gives you guys on the coaching staff a lot of credit. Number one, just kind of, can you give just regular fans like us maybe a 30-second, 1-minute snippet on what that looks like as a staff and how early that stuff starts? And then, sillier question, but if you'd amuse us, what would be your scouting report of yourself as a player back then? You as a coach now, scouting yourself from those days at Tennessee.
Oh man. So as far as like how scouting works here, we have 3 teams. Coach Bowman, Coach Flanagan, and myself run a team. So, on Coach Bowman's team, it's Mike Burgomaster and a few, I think KT Harrell, and then some of the other managers will help them. Coach Flanagan, Coach Pruitt, and then a few of the Marquise Daniels and a few more managers. And then myself, Maddox Jeffries, and a few of our managers have teams. So basically how it's supposed to work is every 3 games is how you try and make it work. But when you get into conference play, it's really tough because you have opponents that you have every year. Like Coach Pruitt and Coach Flanagan always have Alabama. I always have Tennessee and Kentucky. Coach Burgermaster always has South Carolina. So like that type of stuff you really can't control. So like these last 5 games, I have 3 of our last 5 games. I have at Florida, at Tennessee, at Mississippi State. So whoever the hell scheduled that for me, isn't doing me any favors. So, but not during the preseason, it's usually every third game, or if you've had previous experience with the coach on that staff, or if you'd coached in that league. So basically, each team gets together and they put together a breakdown of personnel, teaching points, which is like tendencies and stuff like that, stuff for the guys to pick up on, and then their plays. And we show coach that film. We'll argue about it for a couple hours and talk about coverages and what we think we need to do to be successful against that particular team. And then obviously we apply it in practice and in film study with our players. With technology, you have access to all these different games and clips. So we're able to send that stuff to our guys in a smaller formats. They're able to, digest as much of the information as possible on their phones. They're attached to their phones all the time anyway. So we might as well send them some homework that they can sit there and just watch, personnel clips of what their matchups like to do, so they can understand what those guys do. I think a lot of them watch it. And I think a lot of them buy into it, but at this point in the season, we're spending 2 hours in the film room because you can't really spend a lot of time on the court. You got to keep these guys off their legs and try and keep them fresh for these games, because they come at you really, really fast. I mean, the Vanderbilt game felt like it was yesterday, and then we're playing again tomorrow morning. So, and then your follow-up question, a scouting report of myself. In high school, it was, you got to make them pass, because I never passed the damn ball. I averaged 20-something points a game, and I never passed. In college, it was way different, because I'm playing in the SEC. I wasn't really allowed to shoot. So it was back off, make him shoot the ball, sit on his right hand, and then keep him off the offensive glass. He's a flopper, big time flopper. You can't get caught up in his antics. He talks a lot of shit. Just don't get caught up in that. He's a big energy guy, hustle guy, glue guy. But yeah, definitely back off, make him shoot an open shot.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Love the scout. I thought it was something interesting. Your dad's the head coach. You've been in basketball all your life. You played under him at Tennessee. I ended up in the same career as my dad. I feel like a lot of sons end up in the same careers, or they either do that or they rebel and go a completely different direction. You mentioned some other schools that you were potentially looking at. I know there was between you being the strength and conditioning coach and then the operations at Auburn, there was a gap of time where you did something outside of basketball. Was there ever a vision when you said, screw doing anything with my dad, or anything, I'm going to go this way? Was there a dream that in another scenario you would have went down?
Not really. I mean, when I got done playing, so back to Tennessee, I made a connection at Tennessee. One of my former teammates, who's one of my best friends, Jordan Howell, was working for a company named called Stryker. It's a medical sales company. And one of the things that I was told in college, and it's a very stereotypical thing, is that former athletes do well in medical sales because it's a very competitive field. So I met my former boss at Stryker while I was still playing. And basically, when we lost to Michigan in the NCAA tournament, I was in grad school. He called me. He's like, "Hey, this associate sales rep position is opening in 2 weeks. Either take it or leave it, but I'm going to fill the spot if you don't want it." So I dropped out of grad school and started working at Stryker. So I did medical sales for 4 years right out of college. I was really kind of burnt out on basketball, honestly, because obviously I had played my entire life, and then coach had just gotten fired from Tennessee. So it was it was a tumultuous time. It was nuts. And I was just like, I gotta get the hell away from basketball for a little bit, try something different, and I enjoyed it, did well with it. And as time went on, it was I missed the camaraderie of being around a staff, being around a team. I'd go get a sale up in Abingdon, Virginia, Southwest Virginia. And I'd get in my car. I'm like, well, who the hell am I going to celebrate with? I'm sitting here by myself. I got to drive 3.5 hours home now. Who am I going to call? You know what I mean? Whereas if you get a big win in a basketball setting, you get to go in the locker room and have fun with the team and with your coaches. And it's just different. You don't get to celebrate the wins as much when you're in a different profession. So I found myself my last year in medical sales kind of getting the itch to get back into it. And I actually had a Sunday morning radio show in Knoxville. I used to do a sports radio show for an hour or a couple hours every Sunday. And so I saw myself slowly creeping back into it. And then the Auburn thing happened, and BP asked me if I wanted to come with him to help him, rebuild Auburn. And At the time, I was looking to get a new territory in medical sales. So it was actually a transition period. So it kind of worked out really well. And, I was thinking I was going to leave medical sales and become an assistant coach. Hell no. I was the assistant strength coach, the assistant director of basketball operations, the director of basketball operations for a couple of years. And then finally, got promoted to assistant a few years ago. And, we've been going ever since.
You mentioned being away from basketball made your heart grow fonder a little bit for the sport. You were a radio guy for a little bit. Are you missing radio podcasting? Because we, two guys, we can help you out. We can get you back into the podcast world.
I enjoyed it, man. It was fun. It's it ended up being like a lot of free food and stuff, because I would like I'd shout out like Jets Pizza on the air, and Jets Pizza called me and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do a sponsorship deal?" And they ended up bringing a bunch of pizza to the station that day. So like, I loved it because one, I got to hang out and talk sports for a couple hours, but two, I got to shout out some of my favorite places in Knoxville. When they were listening, and they would call in and be like, "Hey, we'd love to be a part of the show." And it was really cool. And I had fun with it. But this is
I can guarantee you can get some free rum if you do a podcast. That has been my thing. I shout out one specific rum company, Gosling's Rum, and they gave me rum. So
there we go. That's how it works.
Let's see, what's my next one? You were the acting head coach for a little bit there. Can you tell me what is different between going from assistant to head coach? I know that you're standing on the sideline making those decisions, but during the game week, what is the difference kind of?
It was a little different just because BP was able to be at practice on game week while he had to serve that suspension. So just your preparation is a little different. You got to spend more time looking at more aspects of what's going on. You got to, like when you're on the scout, you look at the offense and the defense, but you primarily are on the defense because BP does a lot with the offense. So when you're acting head coach, I had to be a little more involved in the offense than I was previously. And there's just, the biggest difference though is like game time. Like the prep is easy. That stuff's like something that we all do and we're all very involved with. But like when the game starts, it goes by way faster than when you're sitting there as an assistant coach. You feel like you have a little control over the game. When you're an assistant coach sitting on the bench, you feel, can't do anything. You feel helpless. It's like you put this whole scout in and it's like, it's up to them to kind of execute it now. But when you're up there standing up, game goes by way faster. There's so many things going on that like, I have no idea how BP finds time to bitch and complain at the officials because everything's happening so fast that it's like, you really can't get caught up in that. So I found myself, people know like my mannerisms on the bench. I get after it a little bit. When I was the head coach, they were like, "You were way calmer than we thought you were going to be. Like you were way more composed. You weren't, freaking out." Part of it, we were playing North Alabama. So, it wasn't that, it was a close game in the first half, but it wasn't like we were playing Kentucky or anything. But just, I didn't have time to worry about the officials because I was way more locked into, the flow of the game, what we were doing offensively, defensively, what was working, what wasn't working, thinking about adjustments, those types of things. So I think in game was just way different than I was expecting it to be. It was a lot more fun. And the game goes by way quicker.
You mentioned those mannerisms. I guess you are aware. I was going to see if you were aware. There's kind of a lot of us who just watch these games on TV or if we're there in person, you give this tremendous gauge of like what's happening in certain situations, whether that's somebody busting an assignment or something that I'm sure you or one of the other assistants has worked on. Is it more emotionally taxing being a coach than when you're out there playing? I've always heard that from people because when you're playing the game, right? Like, what is it like to sit there and like you said, feel like you don't have a lot of control over what's going on?
Well, one, like the players really don't hear you anyway. So it's like, or they just tune you out. It's like when I was playing, like I rarely remember like interactions with coaches unless it was with BP specifically, like in a timeout or at a dead ball. But like the flow of the game, like you miss so much because you're so locked in on what you're doing when you're playing. But obviously when you're a coach, you're sitting there watching it all unfold in front of you. So you pick up on a lot of things. And I give credit to this team. Like, you jump somebody and they respond and they listen and they'll look at you. They may not want to hear it, but they'll at least acknowledge what you're saying. And I think, great teams have to be able to do that, have to be coachable. And, we coach our best players the hardest. And I think those guys do a really good job of picking up on that and responding. And usually they know what they did wrong before you jump after them. And they'll be like, my bad, I got it. So, my friends always tell me who sit behind the bench, we know how the game's going, depending on the color of your neck. And if that vein in the side of your head's bulging out, So when you guys are winning, you're next, not red. And when you guys are struggling, you're next very red. So it's that's a good gauge.
There's also a great smirk, like when the refs just make just some horrendous thing, like where you can't even like yell. It's just like really like that. And there were a few of those the other night, I think.
Yeah, it's they have the toughest job because I mean it's especially in our league and especially with our team because we're so fast, we're so athletic, we're so big that like honestly, there's probably contact on every single possession. So it's like while we get after them, I hope they understand that we appreciate the job they do because it's really hard. It happens so fast, and it's like sometimes you kind of have to guess because you really didn't see it actually happening. So they have a really tough job. The rules are always changing on them. And it makes their job even harder. That they tell them to like worry about guys tucking in their shirts and guys standing up on the bench. And I'm like, they have a hard enough time, trying to keep up with all these rules that keep changing and all the different things that they're trying to concentrate on, whether that's physicality on the perimeter and the post and flopping. And like, there's just so much stuff that these guys have to keep up with. And it's a tough job. So, you try and keep that in perspective when you're in game. It's hard because you get so wrapped up in what we're doing, but they do a great job considering, the circumstances.
Not to get in your head or anything, but Matt brings up your facial expressions during games pretty often. It's very, it's hilarious.
I don't think there's ever going to be anything changing that. That's just, it's always going to
be.
We
look forward to it. So don't change anything.
All right, good.
So you're an alum of Tennessee. Your dad coached there. I believe your sister still lives in Knoxville.
Yeah.
Like, what is that game? Like, there's a whole thing in our fan base or whatever that we seem to really turn it up for Tennessee. I feel like, it's not a traditional rival necessarily, but they've been playing really well also under Rick Barnes. Like, what does that mean to your family, to you personally? Like, what does that, like, just explain your relationship with Tennessee.
I mean, that's a tricky one because of how it all ended for me. I'm a lot like my mom in the sense that I hold grudges, and I didn't like how that all ended at Tennessee. Now, the fans at Tennessee are incredible. As you guys know, you guys are up in Nashville, right?
Yeah, I am.
You're up in Nashville. Okay. So you understand, there's a passion amongst that fan base that's unparalleled, unmatched. And we felt that love while we were there. And, we felt that love. I felt that love when I was playing, even though a lot of people, still kind of hated me in the Tennessee fan base, wondering why I was out there, but that's okay. It's a little personal for me when we play them because I still, have the memories of what it was like when Coach did get fired. Obviously he made a mistake. He lied. But I'll say this, if that hadn't happened and Tennessee hadn't fired us, we wouldn't be here at Auburn. And, we're very, very happy here. We love it here. Auburn's home. That game's, obviously tough and it's personal because of what happened, how it finished. But like you said, Coach Barnes has done an amazing job there. And it's made that game way more relevant because we've been two of the better teams in the SEC the last couple of years, with Kentucky, and with some of those other schools. I think the three most consistent teams over the last 5 years have been Tennessee, Kentucky, and Auburn. If you think about it, obviously LSU's been really good. Alabama's been good the last couple of years. Arkansas has been there a little bit, but as far as the most consistent programs in our league, it's been Tennessee, Kentucky, and Auburn. I think our two new rivals are Kentucky and Tennessee. Now Kentucky doesn't want to admit they're Auburn's rival, but that's okay.
It's getting there. It's getting there. Their fans are starting to get real irritated with us.
It's in there. They just don't want to admit it. It's in there.
I live in New York now. I used to live in Nashville with Matt. And, I can tell you the Nashville Auburn club and everything is growing a ton. I mean, it's part of the reason I moved there when I was straight out of Auburn. It's because there's so many more people moving to, it used to be Atlanta, now it's Nashville. We highly appreciate the Tennessee wins because those Tennessee fans, when they got Rick Barnes and they were going up, oh man, it gives us we have a sunburn from dealing with us, and are putting the aloe on every time.
There you go. No, it's been a great game, and it's always a tough game. We've won 6 in a row, and they're playing really well right now. So I can promise you, Thompson Bowling Arena is going to be jumping when we come in there next weekend. They'll be ready for that one, and it's been a fun rivalry.
Can you tell me about your sister still lives there? You and your dad both work on the same staff. When you get together for Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, Sunday dinner, whatever, do you talk ball? Do you talk career, or is it outlawed at the family table?
I wouldn't say it's outlawed, but it's it's not really talked about, just unless it comes up in conversation. It's not something that like because me and BP are on it every single day. So it'll be talked about, but it's not something that like, it's happening all the time, or it's not something that we're saying, no talking basketball when we're together with the family. It's just, very free flowing and just, enjoying time together with family and just having fun.
So you've been an assistant, full assistant for a few years now. Brag on yourself just a little bit. I know it's probably hard. What are your strengths you feel like with the groups of guys that Auburn's had the last few years? And if you had to like give us a picture from the outside, where do you feel like some of your fingerprints are on the development of this program that you've been helping to build for so long?
I would say one of the first things would probably be just like, I take a lot of pride in my scouting and what we do in game with adjustments and with the defense. So all the coaches have a big hand in that. But, I feel like over the past couple of years, I've kind of taken the task of taking on some of the harder games. While we all have our rotation of really tough games, I've had Kentucky and Tennessee and Florida every single year, Mississippi State when they've been good. And some of the bigger games in our tournaments and stuff like that. So scouting, like I take a lot of pride in doing that. Obviously I've learned from some great recruiters with Coach Flanagan and Coach Bowman. I was a lead recruiter on Isaac Okoro, Walker Kessler, Wendell Green, Zep Jasper. I helped with Sharif Cooper a lot. I was in there very early with him, Justin Powell. So while, I'm not nearly as talented of a recruiter as those guys, like I've been pretty effective in doing that, over the past couple of years. And, just biggest thing is, I think one of the biggest values I bring is on the staff is, I can say things to BP that no one else can. And I think that's really healthy, because sometimes BP needs to hear it. And sometimes coaches aren't comfortable saying certain things to him. And I just go out in there and just say it to him. And so we have that type of relationship. He'll say this, he'll do the exact same thing to me. And then as far as the players go, just, having been in their shoes before, understanding what it's like to have played for BP and that personality, because a lot of kids may not be able to handle how BP coaches. While he gives a ton of freedom and he's a big time players coach, he also expects a lot out of kids. And some kids, may not be ready for that. So being able to talk to guys about what he's like, don't listen to how he's saying it, listen to what he's saying. And having been through that experience where I had a hard time listening to what he was saying, because I heard his elevated voice and it got me rattled. Like I had a hard time doing that. So I understand where these kids are coming from when BP jumps after him, and you probably see their body language sometimes. Like it's not, sometimes it gets a little negative, but having that relationship with those guys, be able to talk through those difficult situations, has obviously been really good over the last couple of years.
Or follow up, Jackson. Anything left on your bucket list? Bruce and you are so big on making history, right? You got a big opportunity tomorrow. Auburn hasn't beaten Florida down there since 1996 or something. That's a big opportunity. National championship obviously is something that everybody involved in the program hasn't fully experienced yet. But anything else that stands out as something like y'all are building towards, or any sort of bucket list type thing?
I mean, winning at Florida would be big. It's one of the two buildings we haven't won in yet. They're in Rupp, so we want to, obviously, like winning at Rupp is a big one. That's really hard to do. We're obviously in a tough race for the SEC championship. If we could find a way to hold it off and win that, like that's a bucket list every year, just because it's so hard to do. It's an 18 game grind, and to do it in a year where the SEC is as strong as it's ever been, I think would be very meaningful and very, very, it'd be incredible. As far, obviously everyone has the national championship, but it's so damn hard, man. It's getting to the Final Four. Like there's a reason why Auburn's only been to one ever. Like it's difficult. Like Duke's been to one in the past, like 10 to 16 years or something. Like it's really hard to get there. So obviously, we'd love to get back on that stage, but the biggest thing is, one game at a time, just trying to get better each and every game. But it all starts with tomorrow. We haven't won in Gainesville since we've been here. So finding a way to get that one would be huge. A couple of games ago, it was beating Texas A&M at home. We hadn't beaten Texas A&M at home. It's like that. We knocked that one off. So every single game, we find little things of motivation from, Auburn's history in basketball. And, we try and get our guys motivated.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there. I keep telling BP, he keeps talking about, we've lost this many in the last this many. And I was like, well, if we keep winning, like those stats are going to be irrelevant here pretty soon. So just use your material while you can.
I love to hear. I love that there won't be many more of those left. You talked about recruiting as one of your things you did. It's been a wild ride following Auburn basketball the last couple of years. College basketball, college sports in general has changed so much. The whole G League saga we went through like 2 or 3 years ago when you worked so hard to recruit some of these guys, then out of nowhere, the G League pops up and takes away some guys. You got guys leaving early that maybe you thought wouldn't. You got this NIL deal stuff coming out. One-time transfers completely change the game. You have to recruit your own players at all times, along with also recruiting. Like, what is your vision for going forward as Auburn basketball? Like, do you have new strategies? What is it like to kind of keep up with a constant change of what this sport is?
Well, I mean, you can't really change what we're doing because what we're doing has been working. Obviously it's a good problem to have when Chuma Okeke leaves after his sophomore year, when Isaac Okoro leaves after his freshman year, when Sharif and JT leave after like, we weren't expecting any of those guys to be one and dones. We weren't expecting Chuma, we knew it could be a 2 or 3 year deal. But obviously he went off in the NCAA tournament and that changed his whole trajectory. I said before the season with Isaac, I was like, Isaac's really good. He's a top 25. He's a top 15 player in my opinion. And I wouldn't take anyone over Isaac in that class. But I knew that Isaac had his deficiencies as far as what he needed to do to get to the NBA. I said, we'd have to have a great season for Isaac to make it. We went 25-6. That's a great season. Like, Isaac proved he was the best defender in the SEC. He was one of the best two-way players in the SEC. And obviously he got drafted very high because of it. And then Sharif and JT are just unique, rare talents that, we would have loved to have them both back, but they both got drafted. So, you had 4 guys drafted in the last couple of years. So I think you got to keep bringing in really good players. You can't hide away from the great ones. Like, you got Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler here right now. Like, we don't have the season we're having without those guys. And then you can use those, those guys as leverage to get other recruits that are similar to them because, all right, look, we were able to do it with these guys. We were able to do it with all these different shapes and sizes and positions. And you got to use that in your recruiting at the high school level, at the transfer in the transfer portal. But obviously the whole transfer portal thing has really changed in the landscape, and we lost a lot of guys. We lost 4 guys last year to the portal, and we brought in 4. And I think we upgraded at every position. Not ashamed to say that. And I'm not knocking anybody that left, but I mean, Katie Johnson, Wendell, Zepp, and Walker, I think, are upgrades from everything we lost a year ago, and they've made us better. It's just
you lost a guy mid-season last year. What is they say transfer portal is tough at the end of the year to re-recruit these guys. You lost a guy mid-season. Like, how is that? Like, is it exhausting to constantly have to be recruiting on both sides?
I mean, at the end of the year, it's a little stressful knowing you have to re-recruit your whole team. Last year, the only one that we were surprised about was Justin Powell. That one kind of caught us off guard because obviously Justin had a great beginning of the year for us. He was on draft boards the first couple weeks of the season, and then he gets the concussion and he's out. And, at the end of the year, he wants to leave. And obviously we were really disappointed in that. But right away after Justin left, I went and got Zepp Jasper. And, Zepp's as important as anyone on our team because of his ability to play defense and guard. And then we go out and get, Walker Kessler, and then we get Wendell, and then we get KD. So we obviously had to adjust and had to adapt and find ways to go out there and find guys that fit into what we needed. And I think we did that really well this year. We brought in guys that were very similar to guys that were on our Final Four team, in my opinion. Guys that could shoot the ball, play defense, and make plays. And then getting Walker, he's a freaking unicorn. Like, you're not really ever going to find another 7'1" kid like that moves and jumps and defends the way he does. So being able to get him, and then obviously having the number 1 pick in the draft coming in with that whole group, the 5 guys that we brought in, that's a big time. And I think the biggest part about it was those 4 guys all had game experience at the college level. So it wasn't a huge learning curve for them to understand what it took to be successful at this level. And Jabari was Jabari. So we brought in 5 guys that were game ready, as opposed to having to bring in a bunch of freshmen that are still trying to figure it out.
Our last main question is about Walker. We could talk about Jabari too, but I'm just fascinated by what Walker's done in the last couple months. Like, he's said himself that it's a little shocking. I think some of the stats and just craziness that he's been able to achieve. BP said that. I'm just curious. Obviously, he's a tremendous talent. It sounds like you guys really thought you had him potentially in the first time around, but just
Yeah.
has he even, I don't know, just maybe gush about him for 30 seconds about just who he is as a kid and how great of a player he is. And have you ever seen anybody do this ascension like he's
Were
been
you
on
were
and
you
stuff?
were you surprised? He said he was surprised. Are you as surprised that he's this good?
No. Do I only get 30 seconds, or can I go longer?
you
than
can
that?
go
As long, you can stay on all night, Stephen.
So, like you said, like the first time around, Walker, like we thought we had him, and me and BP spent a lot of time on this recruitment. We became very close with his family. They're unbelievable people, and how it all went down was Walker. We thought we were going to get Walker, and we thought we thought it was us and Duke at this point. And we felt good about having beaten them out. And Gonzaga obviously was a long ways away, so we felt good about that. But he said, I have to go on one more visit, coach. I promised North Carolina I'd go on a visit. So I want to keep my word and I want to go. I was like, all right, I respect that. We respect that. Go ahead. He goes, he calls us on Sunday night. I'm actually in Nashville with my fiance right now. And when she was living in Nashville, and got the call that Walker was going to North Carolina. And like, I shit you not, like my stomach dropped. I legit had tears in my eyes. I was like crying. I was heartbroken. BP was heartbroken. I could hear it. Like he's never hurt so bad after losing a recruit when we lost Walker. So, but we left it on a good note. Like, we told him that we loved him and we loved his family, and we wished him nothing but the best. We told him we were going to be cheering for him. And I think that paid dividends when he decided to go in the transfer portal. And as soon as he went in the portal, we called, and, it was now us, Kentucky, Gonzaga, and North Carolina. So you just got to beat out those three teams to get Walker a second time around. So then we got to work on it. And, it was all over Zoom because of COVID. And we basically had to break down our entire offense and show him how we were going to, utilize him inside and out. Letting him step out and shoot threes, letting him drive the ball to the basket, letting him handle it, letting him do things that traditional 7'1" kids aren't allowed to do at those programs. So we showed him how we use our 5 men and compared it to how Gonzaga, Kentucky, and North Carolina use their 5 men. And it really opened his eyes. And then Jabari Smith, wanting to recruit Walker, jumped on a Zoom with us one night. Wow. And basically told Walker, I want you to come play with me at Auburn. And I think that had a lot to do with Walker's decision, knowing that he was wanted in this locker room. So obviously Walker, he gets here, and, Walker's a little bit of a thinker. He overthinks things sometimes. And, he was a little scarred from his time at North Carolina because he kind of got away from everything he was so good at in high school. But he became a really good around the rim scorer. And he lost all his perimeter game, lost a lot of different things. So the biggest thing was building him back up and getting that confidence back. The one thing I'll say I'm a little surprised at, in high school, I knew he was a great shot blocker, but is that going to translate at this level? Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. So the most surprising part was how Walker, how he operates in the air, how he's able to get vertical, get to spots, make plays, block it with either hand, and then go get it. The one part I'd be the most surprised about is his ability to block shots the way he has been. It's been incredible. I knew he had it in him, but I didn't know he was that good. And, obviously he's benefited from having good point guards and guys that can throw the ball to the rim and make plays. But, Walker's overall offensive game has gotten better. He obviously shot a mid-range jump shot the other night in the game. He's made 5 threes in the last 6 games. So he's shooting it with confidence, and everybody's like, why do you let Walker shoot? Listen, if you shoot, I don't care what percentage you shoot. If you're blocking 10 fucking shots a game, you can shoot as many threes as you want because you've earned the right to do so. Walker does so many things for us. While he's not our best player, he's our most important player because he just keeps things together. Defensively, he cleans up everything around the rim when we get blown by. Or he alters a shot. If he doesn't block your shot, you're going to have a hard time finishing around him. But then, guys like Dylan Cardwell have benefited from having Walker around because how good has Dylan been this year?
Top five in the SEC in blocks. We say it every podcast.
It's unbelievable. And he's only playing 15 to 18 minutes a game, but he's benefited greatly from Walker being around because he's found the mold of how he needs to play, I think. And they really complement each other because while, Walker's not as quick and athletic as Dylan is, Walker's going to get everything around the rim, but Dylan jumps out in ball screens and really bothers the point guards. And he just has this crazy energy that the guys feed off of. And, I'm just incredibly proud of Walker because, there was a lot of noise around when he transferred and a lot of negative talk. And Walker's he's a puppy dog at heart. He's a really good kid, and that hurt him. And he had to fight through that. And, he loves Auburn. Auburn's home. Auburn's opened their arms to him and they love him. And, obviously being closer to home, I think has helped him perform because he's around his family. He's around the people he loves the most, and he's around the Auburn family. And I think he plays for those two things at a very, very high level.
Man, it's great. I mean, you guys, I think you recruited this way and everything. We talked on another podcast to some other people about how this team is not just a great team that we're enjoying because they're so good. They're good kids. It's been like this the entire time. There's plenty of other teams with other kids on their school that you watch and you have to be like, yeah, he's our guy though. There's nobody like that at Auburn, and it hasn't been for a long time. All the kids seem like great kids on and off the court. Shout out to you guys for not only recruiting great players, but recruiting great kids off the court.
Yeah, I think, Auburn families kind of embrace these kids, and I think they acknowledge that and they appreciate it, and it makes them play at a different level. They see 3,000 fans show up at Ole Miss. They see 3,000 fans show up at 5,000 fans show up at Georgia. They see 1,000 fans show up in South Florida when we went and played USF. They see all these fans in the Bahamas when we went down there for our tournament. Like, they see that, and that means a lot to them. Like, Wendell Green, I always remember it, like on our road games, she's like, holy crap, they're all here to see us. Like, do our fans always travel like this? Like, Tiger walks at our hotels, or like the lobby is completely packed at every hotel. And it's like, that's like stuff that Kentucky does. And it's happening at Auburn, Alabama for the basketball team. And I think our guys appreciate that. And they've really wrapped their arms around being a part of this family. And I think it's a really cool thing to see.
Well, we don't want to keep you on all night. We could ask you 1,000 questions and dig into I want to say something back to every time you answer something, but we got a couple of quick questions, like kind of a this or that scenario, and then we'll let you go. But we've had a couple people on. We've had Sonny, Anthony, KT Harrell. I know I'm missing somebody else in there, but we've been asking the same kind of questions, at least a couple of these. My first one is, which one do you prefer? Which one is a bigger momentum grabber in the game? A Cambridge alley-oop in transition or a Wendell Green logo 3?
Probably a Cambridge alley-oop dunk.
All right.
Yeah, the loudest Auburn arena has ever been, I think, was in the Kentucky game when Devin got the advance pass up for that dunk. And it was deafening in there. But yeah, I think the alley-oops are a little bit more of a momentum swing for us.
That's leading the way. I think that's like 4 out of 5 right now is the alley-oops.
Wendell's probably the only one that'll say the logo shot. So
I picked the logo shots. That's why we had to ask, because me and Matt argued about it so much.
Yeah.
The next one is heat check timeout or let them play.
BP's a firm believer in letting them play.
Well, we know.
So and I think it's worked in the past.
I hear some hesitation here.
The only time we should have done like a heat check timeout was when we didn't have Zep, because we need to rest our guys a little bit more. So that was, looking back on it, something that we can improve on. But I think letting them play, when you play 11 guys, you have to let them play. Mm-hmm. And I learned that in the Kansas game in the tournament a couple years ago. I was telling BP to call a timeout, and he was like, sit your ass down. Like, they're going to get exhausted here pretty soon. And the final 10 minutes, teams wear out when we don't call timeouts.
Yeah. It seems to be, that's another one me and Matt have talked about a ton, the heat check timeouts. Yeah. So Bruce, you're the coach. He's very fiery, very standing up, yelling. He sweats through the suits and everything. But you have other coaches on the other side, very cool, calm, collected, sitting, like analytic. Maybe one day you're a head coach. You work for one game here. What's your style going to be?
I'm a healthy mixture of both. I'm a big numbers guy. I'm a big numbers nerd. I really deep dive into those things to try and figure out how we're going to beat an opponent. But I got a lot of fire in me too. And I really, I'm not going to be as animated as BP is on the sidelines, but I'll definitely have that fire in timeouts and in private conversation with those guys. If I need to get out there and get after it a little bit more, then I will when it's appropriate. But I got to be, I got to be who I am. So I think I'm a healthy combination of the both.
What is more satisfying, a fast break, like a steal, fast break score, or when you draw up something for a half court offense and they execute it exactly and score?
For me, it's, half court execution. I love that. When guys run something to perfection, I think it's, it's really cool for a coach, because you feel like you had a big part in that. There's so much stuff in the fast break that our guys do that, you kind of get used to it. So when you're able to draw something up out of a timeout and it works, it's rewarding.
Now, a lot of your adult life has been your fashion choices have come down to what school you're working for or playing for. Tennessee orange or Auburn orange?
That's not even close. Auburn orange all day.
All right. We thought that might be a little bit of a softball.
No, not at all. So Sherbert orange, not Tennessee fans will tell you that's a bad orange.
You don't want to look like a garbage man every day as a coach.
No. I love being able to have multiple options, having blues, having oranges, having whites. At Tennessee, it was just orange and white, and the orange was not a great one.
No. It kind of comes back a little bit to, like, Coach Pearl is very animated, very excited. We don't get to hear from the assistants as often. It's I listened to a couple podcasts you were on today, but for the most part, and the fact that you were on a radio show kind of is a thing too. I was kind of wondering if naturally, are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm probably more of an introvert, honestly. Kind of keep to myself a little bit, unless, I hate saying it's a BS answer saying you're a little bit of both, because I do have that extrovert that BP has, but not to the extent that he is. I'm a little more, to myself at times, but I think I do have a healthy mixture of both when I need to. Like, when you're in your work setting, I kind of lock it and do my own thing. But, obviously when you're out in the public and you're out with, like, you got to go out there and, like, talk to everyone and shake everyone's hand and be that personality. And I think that's really important. That's a big part of the job. And, we really enjoy doing that.
There's a difference between, I feel like Coach Pearl seeks it out. He would love to just be on TV all the time, and radio, anything. He would love to come home and be TV camera there to say something too.
No doubt.
Yeah, it's basically that and knowing you're professionally what's good to go.
Until he falls asleep, he's going to be that guy. That's how he's wired, and that's how he's built, and that's why he's been so successful.
Yeah. The last one on our list, then we'll let you go. I heard you're getting married in August. I heard there was some stuff with wildfires and different things, but you're getting married. What were you more nervous for? The first date with your now fiance, or your first time as the head coach in the North Alabama game?
Oh, first date for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Where'd you go? Were you in Nashville? Like,
we were in Nashville. It was, we actually went to a Sounds game. So she owns a gym. She owned a gym in Nashville, Shed Fitness. And, she invited me to the baseball game with her and all of her friends from the gym. So it was basically me and like 50 people that I, really didn't know. So I was kind of getting thrown into the deep end right away. So, may have had a few drinks before we went out there, just get a little liquid courage, and, ended up having a blast, and we've been together ever since.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on. This is a big deal for us. We enjoyed it. Hopefully we get to interview a couple more people on the coaching staff at some point. Good luck tomorrow. We're looking forward to watching.
Awesome, fellas. I appreciate it. I had a blast.
Thanks, David.
All right, War Eagle.
All right, guys. War Eagle.